Good afternoon, everyone. I see people coming in. Happy Thursday. Good afternoon, everyone. We will begin in a minute. Okay, let's get started. Our topic for this month, March, is Design Builds Expertise, UX and Beyond. And our speaker today will be Matthew Conti from ICF Next. Before I hand over the reins to our speaker, I want to cover some items, Drupal-related items. Most of you all know or are familiar with our organization. We are a community of open source advocates, and we are interested in all things open source. In addition to this webinar that we hold every third Thursday at 3 p.m., we have a yearly conference, Drupal GovCon, that we held last November, and we're currently in the planning phases of it for this year. So look out for more information regarding that. We also assist in organizing GovSummit at DrupalCon, which most of you all may know will be held the week of May 6th. And then we also organize global training days and half-day trainings. So if you're interested in any of these activities and trainings, please reach out to us via our email at drupalforgov@gmail.com. We also are available on Slack or LinkedIn. I have to give a special shout out to our sponsors. We would be unable to do all of the work and the trainings that we provide without our sponsors. So thank you, Insignia Federal Group. They are a leader in digital services, modernization, and open source solutions for the federal government. And I have to share all of the goodness, the other Drupal goodness and other upcoming events that are happening within the United States. MidCamp is happening March 20th to the 22nd. So if you're in Chicago, check that out. April 12th, Evolve Drupal in Atlanta. April 13th through the 15th, Badcamp Hackathon. May 2nd through the 3rd, Stanford Web Camp. And one of my most favorite, DrupalCon, which will be held May 6th through the 9th. So I hope to see some of you all there. If you have a topic that you'd like to see presented at GovCon, at GovSummit, please join our planning team. Reach out to us. If you have a demo you've been itching to do, a good idea you'd like to share with the public, please reach out to us. And also, we're always looking for space to host a half-day or multi-day training. And if you have the space, you work for an organization that has that space, please reach out to us at drupalforgov@gmail.com. We always record all of these sessions to YouTube. And as a matter of fact, today's session is being live streamed to YouTube. So there always will be available there after these sessions, even if you miss one. And last but definitely not least, I would like to introduce Matthew Conti. He is a senior UX architect at ICF Next. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen and hand it over to Matthew. Hi.
Well, can I say first, that was an amazing introduction. And for all you Drupal folks here, thank you for your time. I would love to share, the webinar that you have all were so gracious to show up for. So here we are. Design builds expertise and UX and beyond. From UX practitioners to strategic planners to the greater gamut of what we do via Drupal and in what we do as a content management system, content strategy, and everything like that is we're building an amazing experience. So understanding the problem, it's always good to understand the problem space that we're in. The problem is the way that we make participation play a part in everyday use of tools, applications, technology, and how we tailor individuality within any given profession. Without our responsibilities, either extrinsic or intrinsic, being crafted into our designs. We often or can miss the intent behind a sustainable future full of occupational dexterity and conscientiousness. It is the art of being. When we're in a government space, there's a lot of policies and considerations that I will go into great detail about. User experience, we all know what user experience is. User experience is the way we make users feel, the sentiments that they have, and the ability to use the product or service that is created. With quality user experience, we bring satisfaction to people's lives and find contentment through meaningful interactions through human engagement. Within this, we establish skill sets, talents, and abilities to do things. It is usability. So it's not just, the feelings and the positive emotions that may come from, a Drupal content management system, but, the usability of everyday things in our routines. And then there's the experiential design or experience design, XD. Which is the way the applications are designed, developed, and transformed that strongly determine the mastery in which you operate within, how you use it, apply it, and can easily dictate how skills are generated within your organization or group of people. It's not just experiential, it is the creation of occupational growth. It is utility. I think sometimes there's this big misconception of what user experience is. A user builds up experience within your application, Drupal, and it's not always necessarily what they might enjoy, but for their career or occupational longevity, it's the best thing for them. It's the best recipe to solve their long-term problems. And sometimes in these government spaces, we shouldn't disconnect that at all. Where UX and XD meet from the perspective of mastery, subject matter design, right? We don't talk about it enough. We can design subject matter in itself through the day-to-day occupational needs within a software application. This is where user experience and experience design converge, where the subject matter itself is experiential. It's sometimes ephemeral, transactionary, transitory, and either transgressive or impressive. Sometimes degressive too. So subject matter design is the way we integrate user sentiments within context, intention, and applicable use in our product or service through policies and doctrine, legality and ethics, effectiveness and efficiency. It is also known as the desirable usable utility. When you're dealing with the Fed space, as experiential designers, right? We should never overlook these policies and doctrine tied to either federal regulations, OMB, legalese, federal doctrine requirements, joint publications, whatever the do's and don'ts are. There's this subject matter that we're dealing with, agency or interagency, role-based, specific, and non. Usable utility is the main crux of subject matter design, which is a combination of potentially ambiguity with intentionality, whether it's explicit or implicit, meaning it's even being told or it's being implied, right? There is this essence that is being presented in a subject matter ubiquity. So that is bringing in the aspects of doing the deed, whether we do it right or not, and whether or not it's applicable within its uses. Subject matter ubiquity is the way we integrate rationality, responsibility, and relationships into our product or service through practicality and proficiency, sensitivity and specificity, methods and routines. It is also known as the subject matter experience, or SMX. Sometimes, when we're dealing with a content management system, we think in practicality and proficiency easily. But also, we don't think about the sensitivity and specificity of those different pockets of practicality and proficiency given roles, right? Each user has its own persona, has its own priorities, has its own interests and methods and routines. There's an experiential design that is being created, or a user experience that is very holistic, or should be, where it's not always synchronous. It could be asynchronous, whether it's communication, whether it's design, whether it's inference between one person and another, the dialogue, the sentiments by the end of the day. So if you start seeing the subject matter experience also tied into a ubiquitous understanding of what user experience is and how you design it, is you start stepping into this interesting, purposeful play that is very activity-centered. Subject matter experience. Subject matter experience is the conditions, logic, and satisfaction of the overall user interest, needs, also wants. These come from passion and adoption. You want to be able to enjoy it. You want to be able to adopt it because it's pleasant. It's better than what you had before, and sometimes that overlaps with adaptability and progress. When you think of, how one adjusts, how one enjoys things, How, is it regressive, or degressive? We can build out systems that are, if you think of innovation or the innovator's dilemma, right? Is not all innovation or progress is actually progressive. Even though you're using a system like Drupal, the way that we're putting it together from a subject matter experience level, it can be regressive or degenerative in the everyday inference between different roles and subject matter guidance. The adherence to change and trust. It's very hard as subject matter experts ourselves to adhere to something that doesn't make sense to us. It's not enjoyable. You don't like it. You don't even want to do it, right? Now, sometimes it is a job, and sometimes you have to go through the wrestling with challenging topics or interests or trying to get stakeholders involved in the right way. There's a difference between public facing interests versus internal facing narratives, mission, obligation, and purpose. And so the subject matter experience is marrying those two, into a subject matter domain. And that domain is a culmination of conditions, logic, and satisfaction. We call them IAO variables, or interests, attitudes, and opinions. And we talk about coulds, woulds, needs, and wants, right? Could we, but should we? They need it, or do we just really want it, or do they want it, right? These different dynamics create a plethora of opportunity for transactions, change, a further reinforcement of trust, but ultimately the domain that you're in. These different types of subject matter domain can be process driven. If you think of like design thinking and systems thinking, right? There's decision support systems, right? There's, process management systems, which is also management driven too. So some of these can also overlap. Are you managing knowledge? Is it a knowledge management? Is it change management? Is it, are you dealing with KPIs, key performance indicators, or objectives and key results? Is it objectives driven? Are you certain metrics being applied where you need to meet a certain goal? There's instances where, we can use data visualization, but is the data that is being analyzed truly being synthesized for the subject matter domain effectively, regardless if you're utilizing the content management system? Is there appropriate governance over these things? Is it being managed with complete consensus and understanding? Are we detracting, or are we infusing further distillation of this immersive subject matter ecosystem? And we deal with these echo chambers. Sometimes we call them silos in government. Sometimes we deal with these circumstances to where we're completely divorcing ourselves from those disconnects and saying it is what it is, right? When you think about a system or an application that, like if you're dealing with Health and Human Services, or you're dealing with the Social Security Administration, there's certain values within the government versus objectives, right? And how can we make sure that we're adopting the appropriate users where it's not very dull and dry, it's engaging, informative, but there is this dominion within the balance and the paradox between enjoyment, practicality, distinctions, and infusion behind how we, let's say, sign up for Social Security benefits. Let's say you're dealing with retirement or disability, right? Or you're signing up for Medicare and Medicaid with Social Security being involved, right? And now how do you manage that? How do you manage those interactions? Okay, now what's the process between those two just for retirement? Okay, now how do we incorporate the distribution of your Medicare or Medicaid card, or you're getting a new Social Security card, or let's say you're trying to appeal a case for Medicaid or Medicare services or Social Security, right? Now, when you're getting into those pockets of user affordances and sentiments, the applications themselves using a content management system is dictating how someone even executes a task, right? How these tasks are being played out, how they're being carried through, what are the consequences and trade-offs, what are the types of thinking we need to acquire, what need to be inquired about, and where can we inspire those around us to adhere to these things from a user experience perspective, to even though it might be a little arduous, we can still find joy and pleasure in getting the objective done, right? Also within, federal contracting space, it could be company driven too. So it's not just one or the other. It's a culmination of the subject matter domain. And this is where pockets, and this is where we get really deep into what subject matter expertise is as a whole. It's not just one occupation versus another. It is the holistic application of a subject matter experience, right? Which is healthcare, right? And welfare and well-being, and making sure that there's medical aspects taken care of, and being able to have a roof over your head, right? And there's all these different dynamics, right? Like all of a sudden, let's say you're dealing with someone with Section 8 housing, then you're dealing with, uh, different types of public housing versus like a halfway home. And I know some of these might be, sensitive topics for people or anyone that is passionate about the well-being and welfare of people and mental health, like I am. But that is the subject matter domain. So if we think about usable utility, right, there is a distinction between a Social Security worker versus a Medicare and Medicaid worker. They speak two different languages, but yet they need to speak the same understanding, transactionary and transitive between different groups, ingressively or degressively or even transgressively. And that's just making sure that in the totality, you have those different connections, right? Like if you think of Social Security benefits, right, you're also dealing with the Social Security taxes, like you pay taxes, which pay for your Social Security benefit when you retire. Right now, you're dealing with, the IRS, right? And so there's these different pockets of that domain that can be very complex and very nuanced and very deterministic or stochastic, meaning that it's so wide and ranging to where you have the subject matter design that is pushing and pulling in its own unique driven ways that are not disingenuous on one end, but not devalued on another. And when you're building out these expertises through design from an experiential understanding, I at least want others to value what you do, how you're doing it, but understand the importance and significance of what it makes a federal worker or a federal contractor do their job better. Because if they can make their job easier and more concise, practical and probable and legal and ethical, then you're creating an amazing user experience, right? I think sometimes we disconnect that with, pizzazz, right? Well, now there's nothing wrong with that. It's good to have visual niceties, right? Context is king. and there's content being involved in the day-to-day operations of our jobs with complete jurisprudence, or hopefully, right? And so I don't want there to be a disconnect between profession and occupation from what experience actually is and what a user experience is. They gain occupational experience as a user by using Drupal. So the subject matter domain and the subject matter experience as a whole are very unique and very robust. The domain is the sphere of influence. The experience is how you influence and inspire or motivate others. So on one side, it's the lens, while the experience is the colors within that lens, right? And when you combined the lens with the colors that you're seeing through those optics, you have an understanding or a subject matter understanding. And, I think sometimes when we're dealing with federal spaces, it becomes very difficult because the understanding between different groups, especially when it's siloed or one person doesn't agree with another, or, one group wants it their way, another one wants it theirs, and, whatever it may be, it's very stovepiped, right? It's very siloed or stovepiped, and there's no intermingling. The subject matter expertise is becoming fractured and more fragmented than ever before. And the problem is everyone thinks they're an expert, but then no one wants to listen to other expert opinions, right? And so when we're building up these content management systems, it's more important, especially when we have the capability to repeat these patterns effectively and efficiently, to make sure we're bringing everyone in and saying, hey, join the party. Let's all come to an understanding so that we're not at odds with each other. Because as you're sharing and more progressing across the group and speaking across the line to the other and extending the olive branch, everyone does better. But also we do, and how we design our systems and applications. Subject matter understanding is predetermined based on experience, practices, rules, and guidelines, qualitatively through process and principles, education and management, strategy and planning. It is the subject matter expertise. There's integration of how we educate people within Drupal, how we educate others. We think it's just as simple as them pointing and clicking, but the educational management aspects, sometimes it's different, sometimes it's the same. Sometimes the management is the change management within a process, because those are also different processes. Sometimes we disconnect that from submitting an application to get like Medicare and Medicaid, right? Is that there's a change management process from not being eligible to being eligible. Sometimes we get into the technology and say that's the change management process from modernizing, a previous version of Drupal to the newer version of Drupal. You're right. But it's also the context in which it's already being applied, right? And I think that if you take stewardship there and find nobility within that cause, some might or might not, is that you start finding that there's an educational process from it all, between user to application to administrative individuals to reviewers to agents to different types of specialized skills, right? And everyone has their own unique instance. And sometimes our users have an expertise about themselves. Or, if you're dealing with someone that is signing up for Medicare or Medicaid, maybe they got long-term disability and they qualified under Social Security. So they're, let's say, 30 years old that are on long-term disability for a medical reason. And I wish those individuals the best, but they might have a disability to where, as a subject matter expert, you know, pertaining to, you know, Medicare or Medicaid or Health and Human Services or the Social Security Administration doesn't really understand that the user doesn't might have an intellectual impairment. And it needs to be explained to them in a more loving and nurturing way. So there's the educational aspects, right? And that's strategic and effective planning. It's understanding your user because they are the expert. You know, you don't want to say a person with an intellectual impairment isn't an expert of what they are capable of and not. You know, we don't want to go down that path. That's just completely irresponsible. But there, if we incorporate that there's experiences, practices, rules, and guidelines with principles involved within our content management system, then we're marrying two different types of expertises. You know, like if you have someone that, you know, like let's think of like the State Department, right? And a child is born abroad, right? And to US citizens, and they come overseas to the US, right? There's an expertise to the adoption process, to the uh, applicant applying for citizenship, for foreign birth. There is an expertise towards how you go from somewhere overseas to the US, dealing with, you know, Department of Homeland Security and US Citizenship and Immigration Services. So just by you know, from a child from foreign birth overseas, you're dealing with Department of State. You're also dealing with US Citizenship and Immigration Services, and whatever else comes from that, you know, or your POE, your port of entry, you know, and heaven forbid you're dealing with Customs and Border Protection at the same time, or, you know, other elements of the TSA, right? But that's overall an experience that you're getting from a Drupal application too. Even though it's just that one piece of what you're working on, there's this subject matter domain that transcends even that application, but also is predicated and anchored and is the fulcrum towards that whole entire domain. And understanding that process is the subject matter design that you're building in the process. You can't have one but the other. You can't negate or dissuade somebody else from having a meaningful interaction or a truly holistic, ubiquitous experience, because that's an experience design that is being played out from your content management system at a global unified scale, right? This is us building something that you might think is a pebble, but it's a great big boulder that is impacting everybody's lives, how they learn to do their job right and also wrong. That is an immense responsibility for any Drupal developer, stakeholder, designer, specialist, you know, front end, back end specialists. It all matters. It's all valuable. That is user experience. They're using a tool to help make their life better. And at the same time, they're using you guys as the way to champion the quality of life that they're leading, but also allows them to feel like their career is being fulfilled at the same time. It's an immense responsibility, and it should never be shortchanged, and nor should you ever devalue or discredit anything that you guys do. It is fundamental, it's important, it's realistic, but processes and principles, education and management, strategy and planning. It's living a virtuous and meaningful life. So quality experiences are purpose-focused, pattern-aligned, and context-dependent. Quantitatively, good experiences produce occupations and career growth, reasoning and sophistication, productivity and mastery. It is also known as subject matter quality. When you think of occupations and career growth, right, I think I've explained some things, but how we put these content management systems together helps our career grow too. It's ontological design. As we shape the world shapes us back, right? as we are building our occupation up and building our experience, it then is building other people up in their experiences. That's even crazier of a subject matter domain. It's even crazier of a subject matter understanding, right? But it's all purpose focused, pattern aligned, and context dependent, right? So these occupations that we're molding and shaping and impacting people's careers, how they grow, or where they grow in more specifically. It's not just like if you're designing like an application process or a case management process. It's not just, let's cut out all the things that we feel is just unnecessary. It makes it heavy, or let's cut some corners here or there. Understanding what you're doing to somebody else's occupation, what it's saying about other people using it to help change or alter someone's life for the better, or maybe not. But there's this amazing lift that we're all carrying, and it's an amazing burden, in all honesty. For people that aren't as used to some of those distinctions, is we can't do it alone. I can't do it alone with other people left and right of me, because they all are part of that subject matter domain and subject matter understanding. But we're building that through our applications, right? Like when you have an accountant, right? Excel spreadsheet, right? They use an Excel spreadsheet for what? To track numbers, to track things as a project manager, or they use Agile, they use Confluence, or they use Jira, right? Then people become Scrum Masters or product owners, or they get certified in Safe Agile, right? We're designing these things. We're creating these experiences. This is how people now are learning how to do things. People design Drupal, which then you can get, Acquia training in, right? Where you get certified for, which people look for, but someone had to design it. That's now your subject matter expertise. And then we're taking Drupal as a subject matter expert in what we do. And now we're creating systems to make federal workers and contractors execute on their expertise. So if you think about it, it's this perpetual occupational growth and understanding and what it means, and it helps us reason. It helps us have a sophistication to what we do. We take pride in what we do. We take pride in Drupal. We get a sophistication and understanding in what we do. It's our quality of life. It's our way of being. But someone had to create Drupal first. Someone had to do it first. So now that we're taking that, now we're doing it in the Fed space. It's the exact same thing. It's the exact same thing at a fundamental understanding. It's beautiful. It's remarkable, because sometimes we don't give it its much value, and we think that it's less than what it is, or we're not letting others understand and participate with that much enthusiasm that we may have, or we're trying to involve and evolve others and ourselves in the process. It's a learning experience, because as we learn what others do as subject matter experts to create a Drupal product or service for others to use, we in itself are feeding it back in and giving it in return. It's that inner understanding. It's like the greatest journey outward is the greatest journey inward. It's productivity and mastery, right? They say like someone that is really a master or an expert, they're actually really good teachers and they really can educate. It's because you've learned what you can do and then being able to express it effectively in a meaningful and nurturing way. That is the quality of subject matter, right? Subject matter can be anything. If you think about it, it's anything we apply. It's the way we code. It's the way we put different components together. It's the little nuances. That's all the quality control, right? Or quality assurance, maybe to some people. But realistically, you're dealing with a specialization. You have front-end specialists, you have back-end specialists, right? With Drupal. You wouldn't be a specialist if you weren't an expert. You know what I mean? But someone had to design it. Design builds expertise. And then we've taken this glorious product and now we're making the world a better place. So subject matter quality is equivalent to intelligence, both IQ and EQ. This is the human blending and interactions between organizational logic and emotions. I think subject matter expertise and subject matter quality, some people think that subject matter expertise is just IQ or logic. It's not always about what it makes people feel emotionally with a sense of intelligence. Do they feel good? Like a lot of people focus user experience with EQ, but not necessarily IQ. Or IQ and not enough EQ, right? But it's organizational logic and emotions, right? It's the business science, the organizational psychology, and physical and mental comfort. Does it provide joy? Does it provide happiness? Right? There's this quote, there's a difference between passion and joy. Passion is just ephemeral. It doesn't last long. It feels good. Great. Joy is everlasting and provides happiness. It's long-term. It's feeling a sense of peace. So when you're doing your job, it's collected, well-informed, nurturing, and also supportive. Individuality and occupational collaboration, how we even communicate, right? Individually and occupational collaboration, like in the beginning, talked about events. Drupal GovCon, right? Drupal itself created a subject matter domain of subject matter quality to such that you have a GovCon summit. You now have this collaboration between everyone. You have webinars now. You have Drupal for Gov. It shows individuality between us all, as I am your equal, and I hope you feel I am too with you. But it's an occupational collaboration, just like Drupal is. But someone had to build it. And if you build it, they will come. We're doing the exact same thing. We're taking that value, that nurturing value, that sweet nectar that we have called Drupal, and now it's collaboration amongst everyone, right? And then we're taking our subject matter expertise, embedding it into a system that then creates subject matter expertise for others. It's coordination and sociocultural norming, right? It's making sure that we can do things in a coordinated way and what is considered socially normal, culturally and societally normal. Because if we have a great quality tool at our disposal that we've all built a subject matter understanding within, now we're coordinating it with others that might not know it as best as we do, that we need to provide IQ and EQ, intellect in that sense, to normalize what they have pains in. Pain points, a lack of understanding, a lack of value, a lack of trust, a lack of commitment, a lack of standards, a lack of efficiency. The only reason why, we do what we do is to make their lives better. It is the intelligence behind it all. It is everything that we value or don't value. It's everything we do, but also don't do. It's everything that we say and don't say. Sometimes taking an action is not taking one. Sometimes saying something is saying nothing. It's the nuances with it, the details. It's the micro interactions, the micro narratives, the asynchronous communications, right? And, they say tyranny is the removal of nuance. Drupal can provide nuance. We build nuance in our systems on a regular basis with specialists, and content strategy all around us. But we're entrusted to make sure that their subject matter expertise sustains itself and we don't lose that subject matter expertise, lost through the grapevine, where we just lose that transaction and meaningful engagement, right? What would you feel if there wasn't a Drupal GovCon or a GovCon Summit? How would you feel occupationally? Was that an opportunity? Would you lack individuality? Would you feel there's a lack of subject matter quality? I'm sure you would. I know I would. So then you're taking that, now embedding it in a world that makes them understand that too, or they already do. We're just honing it, crafting it, and building it in a more meaningful way that lets them feel like they're getting what they want, but also knowing that they're getting what they want. If you build it, they will come. So be patient, open-minded, and think of how a user or set of users can meet ongoing societal demands, both formatively and summatively. When you think of formal understanding versus, keep it simple, stupid, right? The KISS acronym, right? Summatively, an expert knows how to, or a master at their craft knows how to break it down into great details, or just keep it really summary, a summarization. It's this, right? You have command over what you're doing. Formally, well, it's more this and this and this. But as we've done that, building ourselves up as Drupal practitioners and experts, now that we're doing that for everyone else, this is where, there's great things that can come from it. I should have said, if you build great things will come, right? So be patient, open-minded, and think how a user or a set of users can do these things. Integrate career aspirations into your product or service. If you think of CI/CD pipelines, or you think of evolving and you're going from Drupal, a previous Drupal version, to a newer Drupal version, it updates. You're meeting career aspirations, building out Drupal so that everyone is at the cutting edge of innovation and novelty and inspired to do even better than what they did before. It's the same thing when we build out Drupal products for our federal workers. We need to build that in as well, while being sure we're careful about policies, procedures, legals, ethics, and just overall just well-being. But it's okay to build that in there, but it's also knowing that it's okay. And where it's not okay is just as important. And have the capability to change at the pace of need and delivery. If it's not evolving with time, and we're not evolving the expertise in which we're baking into a Drupal product for others to use, it's a tool. It solves daily problems. There's a need and demand for it to be used so others can do their job effectively or better than where they have in the past. It's the same thing, right? But if you don't do it, it's no longer human-centered. It's no longer, a connection there. There's nothing more that you can gain from it all. And as society evolves, we don't evolve with it, right? The Drupal system will move at different paces that we're building than the economy or society will. So we always need to make sure that the expertise is being built upon, refined, and harnessed in a more meaningful way. So you can connect and follow me at Matthew Conti, at Artist Conti on LinkedIn. And I left about 15 minutes to allow you guys to ask me any questions.
I'm checking the YouTube to see if there are any questions on that side. I don't see any questions.
I see it says Michael Grain's recorder. Grain is waiting for the host to grant permission to record this.
Yeah, we are recording it on YouTube, so if you want to record it that way, you can. I declined it.
Okay. Do you have any questions? What are your thoughts? Do you have any questions yourself?
It looks like we don't have any questions. Well, thank you.
You're welcome. You're welcome. Let me stop sharing. Yeah, I think since we have a few minutes of time, I appreciate that. Hugh Jones, I'm assuming is your name, right? Hugh Jones? Yeah, there's this big misunderstanding of what user experience is. If anything, um, user experience literally is the user's experience. The subject matter experience, right? They build up their career experience through Drupal. That is a user experience, right? Sometimes we disconnect that because it's the Fed environment, right? We don't want to we undervalue some of that stuff, or we sometimes overvalue it, right? It is the federal experience, so we don't have any way to bake in value and meaning into the process. And I don't want there to be a misconception of what can be done versus what can't be done, right? There's the coulds, woulds, the shoulds and needs, the wants and needs there. You could do it, but should you? Let's think about this. Is it something that we value, right? Is it meaningful? Are we getting in complete and total alignment, right? Okay, we could, we should, would we ever use this? Maybe it's a good idea.
So you do have a question. Someone asked, do you have an example of a great government website, one that does its mission well?
Does its mission well? Ooh. I would have to say if you go to a good one is like E-Verify or My E-Verify, which is U.S. Citizenship and Immigration Services tied to the Social Security Administration, where you check for employees whether they're verified as an employee. That's a good one. I think that the Defense Travel System, DTS, for military and federal contractor travel, military, civilian, and federal government, not contractor travel, I'm sorry, not contractor travel, but federal government and GS employee travel is a really good defense travel system in comparison to what they had before. If you think of like I like the Obamacare site, right? That was pretty good, especially when you're bringing in something very unique, right? Before there was no Obamacare website, right? And yet you're bringing in a subject matter domain or expertise there in a holistically unique and new way, right? I think that we don't really associate that, even though there's policies and regulations too and doctrine that we're applying, that we can create anything that is life-changing for other people. You know what I mean? Like, I think that you know, it doesn't mean just because it's a federal environment that we're stuck with limitations. I think there's a big problem with that in the federal government space, to be honest. Um, and then it says, Mike, are you talking about user experience from the perspective of a content editor or front end user? I would say both. A front end user and a content editor, I think, are one and the same. It's a marrying of the two. You can't divorce one without the other because it's the overall domain, right? A user experience is a domain in which you're experiencing something, right? If you think about like social media marketing, right? And you market something for a .gov website, right? That is their subject matter understanding, subject matter domain, and subject matter user experience. Even if like you post something on LinkedIn or Facebook or you have some social media group, right? I know they have like Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services on LinkedIn. It's their own LinkedIn group, and they market stuff in there, or there's different things that are marketing out there. That is a user experience too. So content is way more than that. That's your subject matter domain, right? That's your subject matter expertise because what you're being informed informs you, what you need to do and how you apply or do these things, right? I think that a content editor, editing content, um, context is everything. But I think that's really what it is. Context is being the king of everything or queen of everything. And context applies to not just a content editor or a front end user. It's both. I think I think we run into context in ways that are well thought of, sometimes overly comprehensive, sometimes undercompensating. I think sometimes overcompensating, because everyone has their own motives. The mission, when you think of like, does its mission well? Everyone has their own view of the mission, right? Everyone has their own view of a mission, whether it's a front end user or content editor perspective. The user has their own mission despite others' involvement of what the mission is, and distilling it down is all vital. Doesn't seem like there is any other questions.
Yes. Again, thank you, Matthew, for presenting on such an interesting topic.
Yeah, I think that it is an interesting topic. I think that there's an experience there. It is all user experience, right? I think that um with Drupal, right? It's all necessary, it's all valued. It's all like what others do is inspires me on a regular basis. It motivates me and inspires me to do a better job every day for myself too. But that's because we're designing applications that make sense, comprehended. And I think understanding that there's levels to it all too is very important too. Like, there is like what Mike was asking, user experience perspective from a content editor or front end user. That question is telling me he has a subject matter expertise because he's seeing both as a relationship, right? And it's the same when we build a Drupal content management system. It is a relationship, and we need to understand those relationships better.
Okay. Well, thank you everybody for attending. I hope to see you all next month. Our topic, I believe, will be AI focused. So stay tuned and again,